Good afternoon, everybody, and I know early morning for our friends in Australia. We have some from Canada, we have the UK, so it's later in the evening over there. Thanks, everybody, for being with us. I always appreciate seeing you all here. Today we're going to talk about layers, selections, and masking, and I'm going to try and make these processes simple for you. I know you see me use all of these things in most of the webinars I do in various ways, but this is kind of a way to kind of target some of these things that maybe you don't use all the time, or you forget how to use, or you're not sure what to do. So we're going to try and help you a little bit there. So we're going to start with a little short slideshow of just some of the things we're going to cover today. And let me get this moving. So there are several types of layers in Photoshop, and everything we're covering today applies to pretty much any program with layers. So either Photoshop or Elements, or On One, or all of the different programs out there. They all might do them in a slightly different way, but so your background layer is your image layer that you'll first bring in to Photoshop. Then we have adjustment layers, which we're going to go over the different adjustments you can do to your image. The art layers, which would be like a texture, or if you're compositing other images and things that you can bring in. Then we have fill layers, which can be a solid color or a gradient, and text layers. And then there's different ways we can utilize those layers by masking with a layer mask, clipping the layer to another layer, and grouping layers. Layer adjustments, we have opacity, blending mode, and layer styles. And selections, we have the quick selection tool, select subject, the object selection tool, and the magic wand tool. So let's get to the good stuff. All right, so let me get out of here. Open up my Photoshop, and I'm going to open my first image. So we're going to start with these longhorns. And with this image, I'm going to start processing it with adjustment layers. So yes, normally you would probably use either Lightroom, or if you prefer, like I have been lately, to use Photoshop and use the camera raw filter, which is basically the same thing as Lightroom. That's where you can do everything all at once. But there are times when we need to do an adjustment layer, and maybe we only want to use one of them or target a certain part of our image, which you'll see as we go along. But I'm going to go over kind of the why we use adjustment layers, because it's non-destructive editing. So I'm going to duplicate my layer first, which I like to do, and I use Control-J, Command-J on a Mac. So the other way that you can make these adjustments is if you went under Image and Adjustments, and you'll see all the different things here that we can use through our adjustment layers. So let's say we did levels over here, because that's usually the first thing you want to do if you're doing this kind of adjusting. So this is our black point on the left and our white point over here. Same kind of thing you see on your histogram in your camera. The black point is good. The white point I would bring over a little bit here. Now once I say OK, that has now changed that layer. Okay, that's destructive editing. I've actually changed the pixels of this layer. But even more importantly is I can't go back and change that again. I can't just reopen that setting and readjust it. So I'm going to undo that with a Control-Z, and I'm going to show you why it's better to use adjustment layers. So we're going to start with our levels, just like we were with the other command. Same exact settings. But now I'm going to bring this, the white point over. And when I close this, you'll... Yours, nobody else is saying anything. Everybody can hear me okay? Dave's saying he can't hear me. I'm assuming since I'm not seeing anything. Okay, Mary Ellen says yes. Great. Okay, thank you. So when we use one of these adjustment layers, it automatically adds a separate layer. So we have not touched the pixels of this layer. And we can now, if I decide I want to go back into this layer, all you have to do is double click this thumbnail and it brings the settings back up and you can further adjust things. So this is our midpoint if you wanted to brighten or darken that area. Again, your white point and your black point. And then once we do other things, we can still come back to this because this is going to stay here. And it automatically added a layer mask, but we'll be getting to masking in just a little bit. So next I want to add, so Pat Rec has a comment to later adjust the settings, change the layer to a smart object. Yes, you can do smart objects, but we're not going to do those today. But that is definitely another way that you can do these and have it be a non-destructive edit. I just wanted to demonstrate it this way so that we can see what these layers do, because in other projects you're going to see me use them selectively as well. But thank you, Pat. I got it. So next we're going to do a brightness and contrast layer. And here I want to bring the brightness down just a tad. And I'm going to add some contrast, which every digital image needs. All right. And you'll see, again, we have a separate layer. So now we're going to do hue and saturation. I'm going to add this. When you first open it, this is like overall color. It's affecting all the colors in an image. So I'm just adding the teeniest bit, just like 3 or 4. But now I want to target my yellows and reds for this dirt area. So I'm going to click on the red, and I'm going to lower my saturation a little bit there. Actually, I want that there. And then on the yellows, I want to do about -5. Okay, minor tweaks, but it does make a difference. And this one will still stay there. So you can change each one of these independently and it still keeps what you've done for the other colors. And then I'm going to do some vibrance. So the difference between vibrance and saturation is going to saturate all the colors like equally without regards to how saturated they already are. Vibrance is like smart saturation, where it's going to target colors that need the saturation more than the ones that don't. So I'm going to add, so I tend to use vibrance more than saturation because I think it just gives you a better result. And then there's one adjustment I want to make that we do need to do on this layer. So that's why I like to duplicate it, because it needs these pixels to make it work. And that's shadows and highlights. So again, if you're using, Camera Raw or Lightroom, you're not going to do this here. You're going to do it, in the settings there. Where am I going? Shadows and highlights. I'm trying to talk and look and confusing myself. So it just opens a default setting of the shadows, but I want to bring those back down because I just want to target the highlights a tad. Okay, and say okay. And then you could rename this layer so that you know that you did shadows and highlights, and you'll know, why that one is different than your background. Okay, and you can also now, I would want to add some texture and clarity to kind of sharpen this up a little bit. So I'm going to duplicate my shadows and highlights layer for that, so we can do it on a separate layer. You don't necessarily have to, but because I'm going to use the Camera Raw filter, so we're going to do this as Camera Raw. And we're going to come up to our filters and the Camera Raw filter, which again, I would do all my adjustments here, but for now, for this purpose, we're going to go into effects, and I'm going to add a little bit of texture and a little bit of clarity. And you see how it's crisping everything up as we do that. And say, okay. And then I would crop this image. And And now that I'm looking at it now with all of the things that we've done, now the reds are looking a little too red again. So we can come back into our, say, our vibrance, and this is where you can make adjustments and control things the way you need it to be. So maybe you want to come into the reds. Let's pull that back a little bit more. And that's why it's great to have these, you know, the ability to change all of these. All right. And like always, if you have questions, type them in the chat box. Please make sure that before you type that the 2 is to everyone so that everybody can see your questions. I appreciate that. So, yeah, and Dave says, me or Pat will answer the questions, because Pat is great with that. And I appreciate that. Pat Reck, she is from Arizona, and she's going to be joining us in our Sedona workshop. We leave next Wednesday to drive out. You can get there on Friday. Our workshop starts on Saturday, and it's always a lot of fun out there, and it's a beautiful place. So I'm not going to save that. So now I like to use this image. I've been using this for years to demonstrate this process. And I want to show you, if you're not familiar with masking, or if you're not sure how to use it, how to easily mask something. And this one is just a really good illustration. So again, I always like to copy my background layer. So what we're going to do to this is we're going to make our background black and white and keep our butterfly in color. So the best way to create a black and white image is to use a black and white adjustment layer. And the reason I like using this is because it gives you all the colors here. And by sliding these, you can see how that affects that area of the original image. So I'm not really worried about the butterfly because, excuse me, we're going to bring back the color in there. But I'm looking at how this is all affecting my background. So like the flowers are purple, so this magenta is going to, you know, affect that. You want to get some nice contrast in there. You know, some of the blues in the sky. See, there's not too much cyan in there. A little bit of green. And maybe about there. Okay. And again, because it is an adjustment layer, we can always come back and change that if we wanted to. So now, this is where these layer masks come into play. So the mantra to remember with masking: black hides, white reveals. So right now, this mask is all white. So everything on this layer is revealed. In this case, the black and white. We're going to take a paintbrush. And usually I do things with a soft brush, but because this subject has hard edges, I'm going to use a hard round brush. So I'm at 100% hardness. You want your foreground color to be black. And I'm going to start painting. Okay, so we're going to go around like this. And the best part of masking, if I go oops, and I paint outside the lines, once I let go of my cursor, you're going to see where I just painted. So now we don't want that part to be showing. So we flip our foreground and background back to white and just paint back the white. Okay, so you can easily fix mistakes. Jolene wants to know, participants are muted. Yes, everybody is muted by default. So you're good. Thanks, Jolene. What's that you're sending, babe? Oh, okay. Dave just put in the webinar list. If you want, yeah, yeah, it's in my Dropbox. If you want to see, you know, other examples of all of this stuff I've covered in a lot of different webinars. So this list has all. This is number 45, 6. This is number 46 that I've been doing since 2020. So if you're looking for other topics or more on these kind of topics, you can look at that list and see which webinars they are to find them on my YouTube channel. Excuse me. Okay. So that's really all there is to masking. It's black and white. It's, you know, Black is hiding part of that black and white layer in this case, so that we're seeing the color layer underneath. It's kind of like painting a hole in the layer, so then you see what's underneath of it. So in this case, that's all there is to masking. And you'll see me do some more of this as we go along. Okay. So next up, and the other thing too, I didn't show you when I had the first one or even this other one. Once you have all those layers, you want to keep those layers when you save your file. So you're going to want to save as either a PSD or a TIFF file, so that you keep those layers. So if you come back to it tomorrow and you go, oh, that's too bright or that's too saturated, you can still go in and make changes to those layers that you just created. All right, so in this image, what I wanted to do here was I wanted to select the sky so that I can make a hue and saturation adjustment only to the sky. Now I could try to manually select the sky, but that would be a little difficult to do. But we have some shortcuts now in Photoshop and things that will help us do that. And one of the new ones they introduced, I think last year, is the object selection tool. So under it's under the quick selection tool. So once we right click on the quick selection tool, you can see we have an object selection tool. And what that does is once you click on that, you can hover over any area of your image and you can create a mask by it choosing that. And of course, like here, you would probably add in that little bit of gravel, and it does actually mask the tree better. This is kind of generalized sort of way that it's showing. So I'm going to click on the sky, and it's going to spin a little. And you can see it's now made a selection of my sky. So now I want to change hue and saturation. So now that I have that selection made, when I click on my hue and saturation layer, it automatically applied that layer mask. So let me close this for a second. So you can see that everything but the sky is masked. Remember, white reveal, black hides and white reveals. So everything is hidden except our sky. So when I make a change on this layer, it's only going to affect our sky. So I'm going to add some saturation to my blue and to the cyan. Out there. Okay. So very easily, you can get something masked by using this tool. It's quite handy, and I kind of forget it's there sometime. I do use the select subject a lot, which we'll do in another project. And then the other thing we can do, and it looks like I already did it in this version of the image. Let me reopen. I have one over here. I want to show you the power line removal. There we go. So I did this before this guy. I should have opened this one first. So I have the duplicate layer, and we want to get rid of this power line. So to do that, we're going to select the remove tool, which is this one down here. It's like under your Band-Aid. And up here, we have find distractions. And if you click that, you can do wires and cables, or if you want to remove people, we can do people. And this is a one-click thing for the wires and cables. It's being a little slow today. There it goes. Usually it goes pretty quickly. Okay, so like that power line is gone. And then I would go in and do what I just did with the brightness and adjustment. I opened the wrong file. Should have done that first here. But again, you could then go in and select our sky and add our hue and saturation, and then adjust your selections from here. So you can see the before and the after. It's real subtle what I did. I didn't go too far with it. All right. And then the other thing I wanted to do was darken down the clouds a little bit. So I'm going to do a brightness and contrast layer. And I'm going to copy this mask to the other. So let's do the adjustment first. I'm going to do brightness. I want to bring down, but I don't want to affect the church so much. I want to affect the clouds. So we're going to go here and then a little bit more contrast. And then if, yes, it would remove more than one wire, Cindy. I'm going to select this mask by clicking once in it, hold down my Alt or Option on a Mac key, and then drag. And it's asking me to replace it because it has that blank mask there. So I'm going to say yes. And now we've just copied that mask. So this adjustment that we just made to the brightness is only affecting that sky and not our church. And there you have it. So that's how you can, utilize those particular tools. All right. So next up, I'm going to get off that tool because it's going to keep flashing in there. But we're going to do some selections with this one. And we're going to add some textures, and I'm going to show you how you can mask them off. This is a bird from the Smokies a few years ago. Dave and I were down there, and I took this from the car. He landed on this fence wire, like right next to us, and I had my 150 to 500 on because we were searching for bears, and I just started shooting because I had the camera on my lap. What's that, babe? He says lions and tigers too. Not quite. All right. So first, I'm going to bring in a texture, and most of you who've been on any of my webinars before, you know I work with two monitors, so I usually just click and drag my texture over. If you're not working with two monitors, the easiest way to bring in a texture is to go to File, Place Embedded, and then we're going to go to our webinars, and today, and I'm going to use this one. And that's going to bring it in the exact same way as if I dragged it in. So it's going to match the narrowest part of the size of your photo. And then from here, we can just, I'm going to move it over, hold this shift and move it here. Yes, it's my texture, dear. These are all my textures that we'll use today. So now we're going to change our blending mode and opacity. So we're going to change this one to, nope, not let's play. I want to do soft light, getting ahead of myself in the notes. And I left this one at 100%. Now I really liked what it was doing to the background, but I didn't like the green on my bird. Okay, so you could use that select tool again. You can also use, if I click back on my photo and we use the quick selection tool, and then I select subject. Amy says, some of the best photos come from the car. Yes, they do. Now, sometimes when I do this, it also will select the wire, and sometimes it doesn't. Today, it's not. So we're going to go ahead and select that ourselves. So I have this tool always set to automatically add. You can see the plus sign in the center of my cursor. So I can just click along here, and it will find most of it, and then I can touch up where I've gone outside. So to switch it to the minus tool, I'm going to hold down my Alt key, Option on a Mac, and then just make my adjustments here where it's selected a little too much. And maybe right there. And then I want to make sure it also selected the highlighted, that white edge on the top of the wire. And then when you have your image zoomed in like this at more than your screen size, instead of using these sliders to move around because you can only go up, down, left, right, if you hold the space bar, it turns your cursor into the hand tool and you can drag, in any direction you want. And when you let go of the space bar, it goes back to the tool you were using. That's another little handy shortcut. And here. Yep. So there we have. So now we have our bird selected. And I'm going to go to my texture layer. And I'm going to add a layer mask. However, that's actually opposite of what we want, right? Because we want our bird mask, not the background. So a quick way to flip that is to do a controller command I, and that's to invert that mask. So now we have our texture on the background and not on our bird. So I'm going to bring in another texture. And we're going to stretch that one. This one I'm going to do at multiply. And we're going to bring down the opacity a little bit. Now I want to do that same mask up here. So again, I'm going to click in the mask, hold down my Alt key, and drag. So now we've duplicated that mask. Now I decided after doing that the bird kind of stood out a little bit too much from the background. He didn't quite, he looked like he was kind of pasted on rather than being part of the background. So I'm going to add just a hint of color to the bird. I don't want the full amount of green that we had there, but I want to add just a little bit. So if we double click in our mask, it opens up the properties panel. And we have a density slider, which is like opacity. So if I brought this like way down here, you can see the mask is very gray now because we were only masking out a little bit of the color and this is only affecting the bird. And if we leave it all the way over here, it's taking most of the color off. So I'm going to come in maybe about 75% or so to just, you can see it's just a little bit lighter than a full black. And we're letting just a little bit of that green on there. It's almost unseen, but it's keeping the white of the bird from getting like really bright and making him look, like he's standing out too much from the background for me. And then the last thing I want to do is bring in a border texture. And I want to change the color of this. I don't want it to be this bold. And I also want to, because I had that layer selected, it added above the active layer. So I'm just going to bring that to the top. I'm going to click my foreground color picker. And I'm going to type in my color number because I already know what it is. And it's 0A, 0C, 0D. It's a really dark, dark blue, almost black. We're going to say OK. Now I want to change this border color. I want to fill only the pixels that are holding color with this. So if I wanted to fill an entire layer with color, on a PC it would be Alt backspace. On a Mac it would be Option delete. Now I don't want the entire layer to become that color. I only want that border to become that color. So when we do this, we're going to hold the Shift key when you do your Alt backspace or Option delete. And now it's changed that color. I know it's kind of hard to see because it's still fairly dark color, but it did change that color. And we're also going to change our blending mode to overlay. And then we're going to bring the opacity way down. So it's just a real faint, border, but it's still, covering our image. And if you didn't want the border over the edges of the wire here, you could actually just copy this mask again. And it's obviously it's not masking anything in the center, but it will mask out those two edges for you that we had on the mask. Colleen says, should both masks be the same opacity? They do not have to be. In this case, I took all of that texture off of the bird. With this layer, I only took a little bit of the texture off of the bird. These two were at 100% opacity, and this one I think we did at like 77%. So we're only letting 23% of that color onto our bird. Okay. And all of these settings are in the notes, but that's what what we're doing with these processes. And don't forget to get your notes, folks, if you haven't already. They're on sale until the 21st, and I have in this one a bonus font resources list, and because we're going to use some fonts today, and you'll have the live links to the fonts, as well as be able to find a bunch of others through some of the sites that I share. So anyway, so that's that project. So we've added some nice texture to the background. Our bird still looks nice and sharp, but I think it looks a lot better than just the plain sky. Gives it a little more interest and color. Alrighty. So next up is a pretty sunrise. So with this one, I'm going to show you type and a clipping mask and what that does. So we're going to duplicate our layer, and I'm going to select the type tool. And for this one, I want to type a word, and I want it to be big and fat and bold. So I chose Franklin Gothic Heavy. Should be, is it in my favorites? No, let's uncheck favorites. Go to sans serif. I love the new way that Photoshop changed the font list here, because you can narrow things down a lot easier. So I want that one. I'm going to center it. And I started with 100 point, which you can type in any number up to 999. You don't have to just use the sizes that are in the drop-down list. And I'm going to start, here would be my center, and I'm going to type sunrise. Now I know that that's not going to be big enough, so I changed this. I'm going to double click in the thumbnail to highlight my type and change that to 200. That's a little better. And then I went to my move tool, and once you have the handles, you can also stretch the type and make it bigger by moving the corners. And I also decided to stretch it taller. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and stretch it like that. And so now what I want to do is put this word where I think I'm going to get the best color from the background. And I ended up going, I'm looking at my finished image. Come down about here. I don't want a lot of the dark stuff in it, but I want to get some of that nice sky. I thought we were going to get one like this morning. It started looking like it was going to light up. This is a shot taken from our back deck, and it didn't quite get that bright, but it was still pretty. So now what I want to do is I want to clip. I'm going to turn off the background layer so you can see this happen. I want to clip actually I need to bring this up top. We're going to clip the photo to the type. And the way we do this is hold down your Alt or Option key and put your cursor between the two layers until you see that little square with a down pointing arrow, and click once. And you'll see that layer moved over, and there's a little down pointing arrow that's telling us this photo is clipped to this layer. Now you can do this with any kind of shape. It doesn't have to be type. It can be, I have a project I did in my Camera Club seminar for a club on Monday that I used a leaf shape and clipped a photo to it. It can be any of the pre-made shapes in Photoshop. There's lots of different things you can do with this. And you're not limited now to that type staying where it is. I can still move that photo around or move the type around, either way. Okay. So from here, what we're going to do is I decided above this layer, I want to add a blank layer. And I'm going to turn this back on. So you can see that right now you don't really see anything except that I moved this layer, which I shouldn't have done. Let's undo that. There we go. Now I'll add my blank layer. It kind of looks like we did nothing because we've got the same photos here. But I'm going to fill this layer with white. So I'm going to flip my foreground and background color to white and do my Alt backspace or Option delete. And now we have a white layer. So I could make this background anything I want it to be. I could add a texture. I could add some of this photo back, which is what we're going to do in a minute. But first, I want to now add layer styles to my type, which I love to do, because I want these letters to kind of stand out from that background. So we're going to work on the type layer. So we're going to double click in a blank area of this type. You don't want to double click on the word or in here. You want to be over here where there's nothing. And that's going to open up your layer styles panel. Okay, so there's a few things I like to do here, and I'm going to start with bevel and emboss. Now you don't want to just click this little arrow or checkbox here. You need to click on the whole row so that you get the proper controls in here. And these are things that I tend to kind of standard for me. I want an inner bevel. I want it to be smooth. I'm going to adjust the depth just a little. Actually, I'm going to type it in, 126, since I already know what I want. Up, and then the size, I want to be at like 35. And soften, I like to leave all the way up. And then the angle of the light, right now it's coming from the upper right. I like to use either 135 or 150, and that gives me like an upper left to lower right kind of a angle. And you can see how that now the top part where like the sun would be hitting or light would be hitting is a little bit brighter. It's got a highlight to it. And then the bottom and right has a little bit of a darker shadowy area. But it gave it some dimension. So it's not just flat type anymore. You can see, let me turn that off. That's the way it was. And now that's the way it is. The next thing I want to do is add a stroke, an outline. So I'm going to click on stroke. And the color I actually chose from this image, and I think it might already be there. No, that's not it. 995550. Say OK. And then I decided the size, I wanted 12 pixels. And it's on the outside of the letters, so it's not making them any narrower. And the opacity is at 100%. And then the last thing I like to do with type is a drop shadow. And again, it defaulted to whatever I did last here. So I want blend mode, normal is fine. I want it to be black. Opacity. I didn't write that down in here. Missed that one. But I'd probably do about where it's at. And then the distance, spread, and size are the ones that control the softness and the distance of the shadow from the words. So I want to do 25, 55, and 64. And then I want to change my light to the 135, the same I used for the other setting for the bevel and emboss. And that's our shadow. Yes, Dave asked, can we change the color of the drop shadow? Absolutely. If you wanted white, you could pick white, which it won't show up. I typed too many letters. But you could change it to, if you wanted it to be kind of yellowy, you could do that. Generally, I tend to use black, but you definitely can change that to whatever you need it to be, depending on your project. Okay, so we'll say okay here. So again, now we have a couple things we can do to the background. So first I tried adding a color layer or changing this. So I'm going to add another layer, and I'm going to show you why I leave the white layer in a second. Oh, and you need to bring that back down there because I was in the wrong place. Remember, a new layer always adds above your active layer, so I had that active, so that's why I added up there. So we could fill this with, let's choose our color, and we're going to do F6D7DE. I chose this real pale pinkish kind of a color. That was the first thing I happened to try. And we're going to fill that with our Alt backspace. And I was like, that kind of works, but we're going to try something else. That was like the first thing I ended up with. So we're going to change that. Let's pick our different color. And I went FEA989. I went with a more orangey color. So we're going to fill that. That I liked better with the type. But I didn't want just a plain color. I wanted to add a texture to it without actually using a texture. But what we're going to do is add a pattern, which are built into Photoshop. So if you, I have mine docked over here, but if you don't, you just go to Window and Patterns. And there are some default ones, and then these legacy patterns you can also bring in if they're not already there from the Adobe site. These are ones that they had way back when, 2019. And I still love them. I use these a lot. And I love these artist surfaces. I use these all the time. And it gives you like a, this one's kind of like a, they call it dark coarse weave, but it kind of gives it the look of like linen or like a mat board kind of a look. So I'm going to, for this one, use this one. So when you first click it now, it looks like, what the heck, now I've got this gray background, right? So let's close that. So what we want to do is click in this, and you'll see that it automatically clipped that pattern to this layer. I didn't do that. It did that all by itself. So we're going to click in here, double click, and we're going to make some changes here. So we are going to make the scale bigger because I think it's very tiny and you can't see it because we have such a large image. So we're going to go to about there and say okay. And then just like when we work with a texture, we're going to change our blending mode. So we're going to change it to multiply, and I lowered the opacity a little bit to about there. So now I'll zoom in. So we have some texture to the background instead of it just being a plain color. And if you decide you don't like that pattern, just double click in here again, and you can hit that little down arrow and go back in and go back to your patterns. Okay. All right. So that's one thing that we can do. So now I tried a third way. So I'm going to turn this layer off, which will turn both of those off. And I'm going to unlock my background layer because I want to bring it above that white layer. So I'm going to click that lock once so it unlocks it, and it allows me to move that layer up. So again, remember how before when we had our type, you couldn't tell the type from the background, but now that we have those layer styles, you can. But instead of leaving that solid, I decided to take this layer's opacity down to about there. And the reason I want the white layer is because if I didn't have that, our background would become transparent, which we don't want to do. We need that white layer, and I do this all the time when I work with textures in a background. Have that white layer so that we can lower this opacity. So you can come back in here and you can adjust the opacity. Maybe you want a little bit more. And then the other thing I did here was I went back to my layer styles and I decided to change the color of the stroke to 683835. Made it a little bit darker red and say okay, so that it stood out a little bit more. So there you have it. And then you could, crop a little bit. You can, and again, you still can move this around if you want to. You can move that type layer if you wanted to, stop that. I gotta uncheck auto select because it keeps wanting to click my background. And I want to move this. Stop that. Go to my type layer. There we go. So you can still move this around and get it, where you want it to be as far as the color within the letters. And then you can always crop to adjust your background if you need to. But I think it's a fun thing to do. I've done this with, like, it would be cool to do, like, say you had a shot of Boston and you want to do, a Boston skyline within the letters. I've done it. In one of the webinars, the one about travel images, I did Route 66 and I put a different picture behind each letter. So that's another way you can do it. So let's see how we're doing on time. Quarter of, that's good. All right, so I have one more project and we're going to use some different things in here. So again, you definitely want to, save all of this. And in the opening slides, I mentioned grouping layers, which I don't really do that often. But if you're doing like a composite or something and you've got tons and tons of layers and you're making lots of adjustments, sometimes it gets hard to remember what goes with what. So you can narrow down your layers palette by grouping layers. And if you've done a sky replacement in Photoshop, you'll remember that it automatically groups all of those layers that make up that sky replacement. So you can create that yourself. Let's say I wanted to group these 3 layers. So you're going to click one, hold the shift key, and click, say the type. These 2 are I want to group together. And just hit Control G or Command G. So now I've got a group, and I could rename that to words, say, the words. And if you hit that little arrow, you can see those layers that are grouped together. But it's a good way, like I said, when you're working on really complicated projects to kind of narrow things down. Okay. So let's close that one. So our last one is going to be this sunflower, and we're going to dress it up and add some lettering to it. So I'm going to duplicate this, Control J. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of the white background because I'm going to bring in some textures back there. So we've used some of our selection tools. The other one, when you have a pretty solid color like this that's easy to use, is the magic wand, and that's also under the quick selection tool. If you right click, you'll see your other tools there. And I want to make sure contiguous is not checked, which that means I would only select areas that are touching, where here I wanted to select like both sides of that plus this over here. So I'm going to click over in that area, and actually it selected pretty much everything, and we're just going to then add that little corner that was a little more gray. It looks like it did a pretty good job of everything. So I want to delete that background now. All I need to do is hit either the delete or the backspace key, and I'll turn this layer off so you can see that it now has a transparent background. Control or Command D to deselect it. And we're going to bring in our first texture. And we're going to bring that above the background. So I'm going to bring in this one. Again, these are all my own textures. Bring that one down. Say OK. And I'm going to leave that one at normal and 100% because that's my new background to start with. And then we're going to bring in another one over it. And these two are already black and white textures. This one I'm going to do at, let's see. We did that one. Actually, before I did that one, I wanted to change the color of this one a little. So I'm going to add a color layer and blend it with it. So above this, I'm going to add a blank layer. And I'm going to fill it with a green color, 606C4A. And I'm going to do my Alt backspace. And then we're going to change our blending mode to hard light and bring down our opacity. About there. So I've added a little bit of color. And then I want to add this other texture. We're going to do this one. Oh, let's turn it back on first. Do this one at soft light. And I left it at 100%. And then I'm going to add a little bit of layer styles to our flower. So that means I want to do it on this layer. So again, double click over here. And I'm just going to add a little bit of a drop shadow. That's the only thing I'm going to do here. And we want the drop shadow. Instead of normal, I'm going to do it at soft light because I'm working over colored layers. My opacity, I brought up some. Angle is fine. And then we're going to adjust these. 19. And again, I would say I only have these numbers because I've done this and I wrote them down for the notes. So we just got this little soft kind of a shadow going on now. Say okay. And let's see. Actually, this texture I put over everything. So let's bring that to the top. But I did want to mask it a little bit off of the green areas. So we're going to add our layer mask. I get ahead of myself and don't read my own notes. We're going to grab our brush, make our foreground black. And this time I'm going to use, I'm going to kind of click in the middle. I don't want a super soft brush, but I don't need a really hard brush either. And the reason you want, the softer brush kind of feathers those edges more. So we're going to, let's see, am I taking it all off? Yep, I'm going to mask it off these lighter green leaves. Just because they got a little kind of too light, I wanted to see a little bit more of that color. And make it a little bit smaller here. And yeah, that works. Just to bring back those leaves just a little bit. And now we're going to add some type. So we're on the top layer here, so that's good. We want to add our type above that. So we're going to go with the type tool. And the font I'm going to use is script, and it's called Lydia Puente. And this is one I downloaded for free from the web. I think I went past it. Lydia Puente. And I want it to be, I ended up at 288 point. Don't ask me how I picked that number. And then we're going to change our color. 758551. So we're going to use a greenish color. And I'm going to click, I'm just going to click and then move it later. And it went back to the other size, so that's okay. So we're going to type that, double click in here, change our size. Sometimes it does that for some reason. So that is our type. So I'm going to go to the move tool so I can see it better. And we're going to put that kind of over here. And this is, you can see how these letters are overlapping. It's remembering some settings that I had in my settings last time I did some type. We don't want it, we want these to be nice, smooth letters. So again, I have my tools over here docked. You would go to Window and Character is the panel that will give you this. And yeah, it's adjusting spacing between letters is called kerning, K-E-R-N. I used to be a typesetter, so that's why I know that. So we're going to go back to 0, and then we can individually, like these two letters need a little more tweaking, the N and the S. So I'm going to go back to my type tool so I can just highlight those two letters and then come back up here and add some space. And then we can adjust that as needed. So you can see how it pushed them apart, so now they line up a little bit better. And I don't know why this word looks so light, but we're going to be changing some, we're going to do some layer style, so we'll fatten it up a bit. So then I want to, let's do the layer styles here. So we'll double click. We're going to do bevel and emboss, inner, smooth, depth 220, up, size 54, soften 9, and our angle is the 135, and then this type looks weird though. It's very, very faint. It doesn't look that way on my finished one, which is odd. You never know, right? Things always never work the way you want. So we're going to do a little bit of a drop shadow. So we're going to do it at multiply, the opacity 71, angle 135, distance 20, spread 38, and size 21. Okay, so that makes it look a little bolder. We'll say okay. Now I want to add "You Are My Sunshine" in here. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see this a little better. So I want to change typefaces now, but if I do that right now, it's going to change what I've already done. Okay, so I'm on my type tool. I want to make make a new layer before I start typing. So I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click. And now I can change my font and my sizes for the new letters. So this one I'm going to use a different font. This one is I think it's serif. Maybe not. Let's go to all. And it is not my favorites. Okay, let's scroll down to the M's. It's Monotype Cursiva. I have a lot of fonts. Too many. And a lot that I need to want to put in here. You don't need to add all of your fonts, and you really shouldn't put everything that you have in there because it will slow down the startup of your computer. When it's running through its things, you'll see it says it's loading brushes and loading fonts. So you can add fonts as needed and then delete them when you don't need them. So we're going to change this to 76 point. And I want it the same color. So I'm going to type "You Are My," and then grab my move tool and just move it into place. And when I'm doing word art like this, I like to make things kind of nestle and work together. This one, it's kind of limited to what I can do, but I want, like this part of the Y kind of fitting into the curve of the S over there. And then we're going to copy our layer style and then just make a few tweaks because this point size is so much smaller. So if we click on our layer style, right click, copy layer style, and select our other layer, right click, and paste layer style. And then we can open that one, and we're going to just do slight changes. So for our bevel, we don't want it to be quite as predominant. So 21, soften, I only went with 2. And then our drop shadow, the size I changed to 6. And say okay. And then I lowered the opacity of each of these layers to like 90% so that they were just a little bit softer on the overall look of them. And there. And then let's Control-0 and resize it. And then the last thing I wanted to do was to add a little bit of a border. So I'm going to bring in one of my frames. We're going to rotate this counterclockwise. So I like to rotate I put my cursor outside the corner till you get the curved arrow. And if you hold the Shift key, when you start dragging, it moves it in 15-degree increments, so it's nice and easy to get it square, and you're not trying to fight with it. And we're going to stretch this out. And of course, we're not going to use black. We're going to change, actually, we might leave it that. Let's make sure that's at the top. We're going to change it to soft light and bring down the opacity. So it won't look black. It's going to blend in with that greenish color. And then I didn't really like it over that letter, so I'm going to add a layer mask to this layer by clicking there. Grab my brush again, make sure it's black. If you hit the letter D, it will reset these to white and black, and the letter X will flip them. So it's a keyboard shortcut way to do it. And then I'm just going to do a little mask and get that border not showing over that letter S. And there you have it. One thing I put in the notes, when you're downloading fonts from online, especially free ones, those sites have tons and tons of ads. So be very careful what you're clicking on, that you're actually downloading the font and not, some web browser or some other stupid thing that might be advertised. And it usually, if you really look, you'll be able to find it, the right thing. But don't, lots of things say, download. Well, make sure it's the one that's, usually it's close to where the actual font is, and it makes it, clearer for you. And there you have it. We're only a couple minutes over, so that's good. Hope you all enjoyed today's session and learned a few tips. And it's a refresher for everybody. Maura said she's trying to log in to purchase the notes. The site's telling me wrong password. Yeah, you have to be logged in. Maura, I can do a password reset and see if I can force that out for you. So I'll message you in a few minutes. Alrighty. So if you have any questions, as always, you can reach out to me. We appreciate y'all being here. Don't forget to grab your copy of the notes before they're not on sale. And enjoy. And we'll see y'all again soon. Have a good night.